The Book of Numbers, known in Hebrew as Bamidbar, meaning in the wilderness, is a journey of transformation. From the awe-inspiring heights of Mount Sinai to the desolate sands of Moab, this book chronicles the faith, struggles, and divine encounters of the Israelites. It is a story of a nation being shaped by God, of censuses and covenants, rebellions and restorations, all under the watchful presence of the Almighty. As we delve into this sacred text, we witness not only the trials of the wilderness, but the enduring faithfulness of God, leading his people ever closer to the promised land. Welcome to the Book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Torah. Known in Hebrew as Bamidbar, meaning in the wilderness, this sacred text recounts Israel's 40-year journey from Mount Sinai to the plains of Moab. It is a story of trials and triumphs, rebellion and redemption, all under the watchful eye of a faithful God. Numbers begins where Exodus left off. The Israelites have spent nearly a year at Mount Sinai, where they received the covenant and built the tabernacle, a sacred dwelling for God's presence. The people are no longer slaves, but a nation set apart, called to live in obedience and holiness. At God's command, Moses conducted a census of all men able to fight, numbering over 600,000. This was not just an act of record-keeping. It was a preparation for conquest. The camp was meticulously arranged, with the tabernacle at its center, a constant reminder of God's presence and authority. The Levites, set apart for service, played a vital role in maintaining the tabernacle and leading worship. Their duties underscored the holiness of God and the necessity of reverence in approaching him. The tabernacle was more than a tent. It was a dwelling place of God among his people. The journey through the wilderness was not easy. Though God's presence was with them, the Israelites faced trials that tested their faith. From complaints about food and water to outright rebellion, their struggles mirrored the challenges of trusting in God's provision and promises. At its heart, Numbers is a story about the faithfulness of God. Despite the rebellion of his people, he remained committed to his covenant, preparing a new generation to enter the promised land. The themes of faith, obedience, and divine mercy resonate not only for Israel, but for all who seek to walk with God. The Book of Numbers is more than a historical record. It is a testament to the enduring faithfulness of God and a call to trust him through every wilderness. As we journey through this remarkable book, we uncover lessons that continue to inspire faith and obedience in every generation. The Book of Numbers begins with a monumental task, a census of the Israelite men eligible for war. Over 600,000 men aged 20 and older were counted, a testament to the nation's growth since their time in Egypt. This census was not merely administrative. It was a preparation for the conquest of Canaan, a land God had promised to their ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The camp reflected divine order, with the tabernacle, God's dwelling place, at its heart. The tribes of Judah, Reuben, Ephraim, and Dan were positioned as leaders on the eastern, southern, western, and northern sides, ensuring that every detail aligned with God's instructions. Unique among the tribes, the Levites were not counted in the census. Instead, they were set apart for service to the Lord, entrusted with the care of the tabernacle and its sacred furnishings. Divided into the clans of Kohath, Gershon, and Merari, each group had specific duties, from carrying the ark to maintaining the structure of the tabernacle itself. As high priest, Aaron bore the weight of Israel's spiritual responsibility. His garments, adorned with precious stones and inscribed with "Holy to the Lord," symbolized the nation's covenant with God. Through offerings and intercession, the priests ensured that God's presence remained among his people. The meticulous organization of the camp and the centrality of the tabernacle underscored a profound truth. God is holy, and his people were called to reflect his holiness. Every sacrifice, every detail of worship, reminded the Israelites of their covenant with the Lord. At Mount Sinai, Moses conveyed God's instructions to the people, preparing them not only for the physical journey ahead, but also for the spiritual transformation required to fulfill their destiny as a holy nation. The census, the camp's organization, and the Levites' role were all part of God's plan to prepare his people. The Israelites were not just wandering. They were being shaped into a nation ready to inherit the promised land. Yet, as Numbers would reveal, obedience and faith were essential for this journey. From the sacred mountain of Sinai, God spoke, organizing his people and establishing his presence among them. But the journey ahead would test their faith, obedience, and trust in his promises. After nearly a year at Mount Sinai, the Israelites were finally ready to continue their journey. The lifting of the cloud above the tabernacle signaled God's direction for his people. As Numbers 10:11 states, in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th day of the month, the cloud lifted from over the tabernacle of the testimony. Each tribe had a designated position in the journey, symbolizing both order and unity under God's leadership. At the heart of the procession was the Ark of the Covenant, a constant reminder of God's presence among his people. Day and night, the Israelites were guided by a pillar of cloud and fire, a visible sign of God's faithfulness. No sooner had the journey begun than complaints arose. The hardships of the wilderness tested the Israelites' faith. They grumbled about their food, their thirst, and the long journey ahead, forgetting the miraculous deliverance God had provided. Even Moses, the chosen leader, felt the weight of the people's discontent. In response, God provided help, appointing 70 elders to assist Moses in leading the nation. In response to their cries for meat, God sent quail to the camp, but their greed and ingratitude led to judgment. Numbers 11:33 recounts how, while the meat was still in their mouths, the Lord struck the people with a great plague. This served as a sobering reminder of the consequences of rebellion and disobedience. At Kadesh Barnea, Moses sent 12 men to spy out the land of Canaan, the promised land. For 40 days, they explored its beauty and bounty, returning with evidence of its abundance. Despite the faith of Caleb and Joshua, fear spread like wildfire among the people. They rebelled, accusing Moses of leading them to their deaths. Their refusal to trust in God's power led to devastating consequences. In Numbers 14, God decreed that the generation who had rebelled would not enter the promised land. For 40 years, they would wander in the wilderness until a new generation arose, one prepared to trust in God's promises. Only Caleb and Joshua, the two spies who trusted in the Lord, were spared. They would live to see the fulfillment of God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The journey through the wilderness was not just a physical trial, but a spiritual one. At every step, God's faithfulness and the people's need for trust and obedience were tested. As the Israelites moved forward, they carried with them the lessons of rebellion, judgment, and grace. When the Israelites rebelled at Kadesh Barnea, refusing to enter the promised land, God pronounced a sobering judgment. Numbers 14:29 states, "In this wilderness your bodies will fall. Every one of you 20 years old or more who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me." For 40 years, the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, a generation sentenced to die before the promise could be fulfilled. Yet even in this judgment, God's mercy was evident. He continued to provide manna, water from the rock, and his presence through the cloud and fire. In Numbers 21, the Israelites once again grumbled against God and Moses, complaining about their hardships. In response, God sent fiery serpents among them, and many died. When the people repented, God provided a means of healing, a bronze serpent. Numbers 21:9 records, "When anyone was bitten by a snake and looked at the bronze snake, they lived." This act of faith not only brought physical healing, but also foreshadowed Christ's redemptive work. As Jesus explained in John 3 verses 14-15, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him. Korah's rebellion against Moses and Aaron was not just a challenge to their leadership. It was a direct challenge to God's authority. Numbers 16 recounts how God caused the earth to swallow the rebels, reaffirming his choice of Moses and Aaron as his appointed leaders. In the aftermath of the rebellion, God further affirmed Aaron's role as high priest through the miraculous budding of his staff, a symbol of life and divine appointment. At Meribah, the people's thirst led to another rebellion against Moses and Aaron. In frustration, Moses struck the rock twice instead of speaking to it as God had commanded. Though water flowed and the people were satisfied, Moses' disobedience led to a severe consequence. Numbers 20:12 recounts God's words, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." Even Moses, the faithful servant of God, faced the weight of disobedience, yet his leadership continued, guiding the people through the remaining years of their wilderness journey. The 40 years in the wilderness were a time of judgment, mercy, and preparation. Despite their failures, God's faithfulness never wavered. He provided for their needs, corrected their paths, and prepared a new generation to trust in His promises. After 40 years of wandering, the time had come for a new generation to take their place. Numbers 26 records a second census, numbering over 601,000 men of fighting age, marking the preparation for conquest. This census was not just administrative. It was a reaffirmation of God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Among the multitude, only Caleb and Joshua remained from the original generation. Their unwavering faith at Kadesh Barnea set them apart. And now they would lead Israel into the fulfillment of God's covenant. Fearing the Israelites, Balak, king of Moab, summoned Balaam to curse them. But God had other plans. Instead of curses, Balaam spoke blessings, declaring in Numbers 24:17, "A star will come out of Jacob, a scepter will rise out of Israel." Though Balaam was not a follower of Yahweh, God used him to reveal a messianic prophecy, a promise of a ruler who would rise to bring redemption not just to Israel, but to the entire world. In Numbers 27, the daughters of Zelophehad, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah, approached Moses with a bold request. Their father had died without sons, and they asked for the right to inherit his land. Their plea was unprecedented, but God affirmed their claim, establishing a precedent for inheritance laws in Israel. This moment not only secured justice for these women, but also demonstrated God's care for the marginalized, ensuring fairness and equality within His covenant community. Though Moses was not permitted to enter the Promised Land due to his disobedience at Meribah, God granted him a glimpse of it from Mount Nebo. Before his death, Moses commissioned Joshua as his successor, laying hands on him and imparting wisdom and leadership. Joshua, a man of faith and courage, was tasked with leading Israel into the land of promise. His leadership would mark a new chapter in their journey, one rooted in God's faithfulness and their obedience. As the Israelites camped by the Jordan River, they stood on the threshold of fulfillment. The 40 years of wandering had come to an end, and a new generation, shaped by God's guidance and discipline, was ready to claim their inheritance. This moment was a culmination of God's promises, a testament to His faithfulness despite Israel's failures. The promised land lay before them, a land flowing with milk and honey, waiting to be possessed. The final chapters of Numbers remind us of God's unchanging faithfulness. Through rebellion and repentance, discipline and deliverance, He prepared His people for the inheritance promised to their ancestors. This legacy of trust, obedience, and hope continues to inspire believers today. The book of Numbers stands as a powerful testament to God's unwavering faithfulness. For 40 years, He led His people through the wilderness, providing manna from heaven, water from rocks, and His guiding presence in a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. Despite their rebellion, complaints, and moments of doubt, God's covenant with Israel endured. As the journey came to an end, the sight of the Promised Land was not just a fulfillment of a geographic promise. It was a reflection of God's enduring grace, patience, and love for His chosen people. The story of Numbers is a story of trust and obedience. It reminds us that while human faith can falter, God's promises never fail. Through their struggles, The Israelites learned the cost of rebellion and the blessings of reliance on God. From the wilderness to the Jordan River, God prepared them for the inheritance of the promised land. The lessons of Numbers are timeless. They call us to trust in God's promises, walk in obedience, and live with faith even in the face of challenges. Just as the Israelites were called to be a holy nation, set apart for God's purposes, so are we invited to reflect His character in our daily lives. The priestly blessing in Numbers 6 remains a powerful reminder of God's desire to bless His people, to guide them, and to grant them peace. It is a message that transcends time and continues to inspire believers today. The covenant established in the wilderness was more than a promise of land. It was a promise of relationship. Numbers reveals a God who desires to dwell among His people, guiding them with patience and love, even through their struggles. It reminds us that His purposes are eternal, and His faithfulness is unchanging. God's faithfulness is as true today as it was in the wilderness. His promises endure, inviting each of us to trust in His word and follow His lead. The book of Numbers reminds us that our journey, like Israel's, is one of faith. Through trials and triumphs, God walks with us, leading us to the inheritance He has prepared. Numbers is not just a story of the past. It is a call to trust, obey, and live in the light of His promises.
Thank you for joining the time traveler on this journey through history. If you found this story moving, insightful, or worth remembering, please take a moment to support the channel by clicking the like button. It helps more people discover these important stories. And if you'd like to see more documentaries like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we can keep these stories alive for future generations. Your support means the world. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.